Hello. I have a book to talk about. This one is a memoir. This is called Silenced No More, Surviving My Journey to Hell and Back by Sarah Ransome. Is a survivor of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And it's her memoir about those days. It was written a few years ago, and I just read it. And this is my first time reading a book-length, first-hand account of what went on with someone who was caught up in the web of horror that Jeffrey Epstein and then Jeffrey and Ghislaine Maxwell spun. And it's really good. And what's good about this book and what really hit me is how it just sort of pointed out how, well, the world, when you talk about groomers, well, the whole patriarchal society, the whole world is grooming women for basically what went on with Sarah here and all the others. And all the others we don't even know. Jeffrey Epstein, had hundreds of people that he pulled in. They were very energetic. We hear the accounts, and she mentions them, how actually went out with Ghislaine, who would go out and troll Central Park looking for young women and offer them, by the way, I'm recruiting for Victoria's Secret models. So that's how some of them were pulled in. They could be Victoria's Secret models. And of course, Jeffrey Epstein is quite connected to Victoria's Secret in that he was really very closely connected to this guy, Lex Wexner, who is the owner of the Limited. I don't know if he still does or not, but he is the one who owned Victoria's Secret, and as it rose to become this giant retail thing, I don't know where it is now. But nobody should shop there. I mean, not only is it tacky, and they're may make cheap shit to make more money, but it's well, it's all connected to all this other crap. And I mean, you want to buy something from someone who financed Jeffrey Epstein and his rapes? Well, then you can go to Victoria's Secret and buy your fantasy wear there, I guess. So she starts out it's a chronological story, and it's a very rough story in the situation where when you're a victim of a rape or something, well, you don't know. I hope you don't know. But when one is a victim of rape and calls them out and goes to trial and all that, how the opposing attorneys, the defense attorney of the rapist, whatever, can grill you about your past history, all these things. Well, Sarah Ransome here does not shy away from really delivering what her story was all about. And, and as I said, it was a story of basically a culture of grooming and rape. Her mother was alcoholic. She's from South Africa, oddly enough. She was raised partly in South Africa, where her grandfather sent the family off. I don't remember, there's lots of details about the family and all that, and lots of characters coming in and out. So I don't remember all the details, and I'm not going to look them up, and it doesn't really matter. You can look it up yourself when you read the book, and I do recommend the book because I think it's particularly special in that it tells the story of someone who's not perfect and whose sexual history is not perfect. And that is usually a something that oh, well, she worked as a survival sex worker is what she calls it. So she was prostituting to make money on several occasions in her life, several situations and times in her life. And so right there, that's something that a defense would jump all over if she was come to trial and accused, well, Jeffrey Epstein in this case, if it had come to that, if we hadn't, if Epstein hadn't been eliminated, self-eliminated or otherwise. I mean, she does talk about the Michael Baden testimony about after he examined the evidence of the supposed suicide, and it said, well, it didn't look like a suicide. A hanging suicide would not have this particular marker in the neck, so forth. So, and the cameras being, the surveillance cameras in the jail being off, and the guards being sleeping, and all this, it's just too much of a coincidence. Plus, too many people were involved with him, and too many high-profile people were involved with Epstein and his web, including Ehud Barak and Bill Clinton and Donald Trump. So she goes through her childhood. She was her mother being alcoholic. Her mother was not always watchful and brought in various men. Alcoholics can tend to have young alcoholics tend to have a rather wild life as far as associating with others, and apparently that's what went on with her mother. And so one of her mother's men, on some drunken night when she was 11, came in and raped her. And so that was her initiation into the joys of sex. This creep drunk from her mother who came in and raped her while she was trying to sleep. So that was the beginning of it. And it went on from there. I mean, she recounts the story of several guys coming in and out, and how her parents separated. Her father was some distance away. Her mother was alcoholic, so she was kind of dealing with her mother a lot. And her mother was still alive. I guess her father was still alive too when she wrote this book. And she told her mother, "Look, I'm going to tell the story here." And so I don't know what happened after the book came out as far as their relationship, or if the mother's still alive. The mother was more or less my age, so Sarah Ransome would be a child of that would be age of a child that I would have. So she gets recruited in the Epstein bit by one of Epstein's pre-raped girls who was sent out to be a recruiter. He had it was sort of a pyramid scheme where he would come in and get somebody in and then rape them or whatever, and then well, you don't have to be raped anymore if you bring in other girls, that kind of thing. And so that's what happened. She was lured into it when she came to New York. She came to New York first, right off the bat, coming to New York from England. She'd been back and forth to England and South Africa, and she was living in England, and just on her own flew into New York at age 22. She's an older victim of Epstein. She was not, fortunately for her, she was not, 12, 14, whatever some of these other girls' ages were. So yeah, she flew into New York, and she was already, kind of a wild girl. I mean, she was, part drinking, a lot of drinking herself, alcoholism, cocaine, and she was out at a club somewhere and met one of Epstein's recruiters, and come to a movie with me and this billionaire who might be able to help you or get you into. She wanted to get into FIT, Fashion Institute of Fashion, FIT, FIT. Fashion Institute, something. It's a art school in New York, and she wanted to get into that. And of course, she didn't have any money and was new in town. Fortunately, she had a place she met up with some guy online and was living with him, and in his grungy apartment. He'd offered her a room for a while, and she stayed there for a while, actually, and ended up paying him rent. But, but she's not happy. There was a grungy place, and but the guy was nice, and, he didn't rape her, basically. He didn't exploit her. Yeah, so she goes to a movie with several girls and Jeffrey. And we sit beside Jeffrey, and he put his hand on her knee or something, during the moment in the movie, something. So it was like easing in, and then come to the island. Oh, we fly to the island, and he lives in an island, a private jet. Okay, so she's like, all right, well, and she was recruited and felt safe because this woman, was it Natalia? Or I think that was the name of the recruiter. Anyway, this other young woman recruited her in, so she felt safe. So, well, if it's safe for this woman, it's going to be safe for me. Naturally, that's what you think. And well, it didn't turn out that way at all. She did fly down to the island on the 727, the Lolita Express, and with a bunch of women, young women, the pilot, and Jeffrey are the only men on the plane. So it's like a 4-hour flight down to the Virgin Islands, where this place was, and so they're flying on the plane, and everybody's sort of snoozing, and I guess the bedroom in the back is open or whatever. Anyway, the door was open. It was open then, and she kind of wakes from a little snooze and finds Jeffrey banging one of the women on the plane in the back there on the bedroom in the bed, and talks about how loud they are, and that the other people just sort of, pretended they were still sleeping and ignored it. And she thought, wow, this is kind of weird. And she started feeling pretty much unsafe at that point. And of course, she was finding out what was really going on here. And yeah, she goes into a lot of details about what goes on and what. How Jeffrey needed his massages, so everybody's supposed to massage Jeffrey. Even on the plane, it's like, oh, now I'm going to teach you how to rub his feet. So you're going to rub his feet. Oh, now you're not doing it right. You have to do it this, and so one of them's rubbing his shoulders and one of them is rubbing his feet. It's like, all these sex slave bits. Take care. Treat me, massage me. I've never felt the need to be massaged, and I'm kind of on the other side of all that. I don't want to be serviced in that kind of way, but that's what Jeffrey liked. So So yeah, that's what would go on. You would go into his room, and the massage table in the middle of his room. Later, in down at the island is where it happened to her for the first time. Go in and massage Jeffrey, and she massages Jeffrey, and and then he switches it, and I'm going to massage you this time. So he has her take off her dress and lay on the table and pulls down her underwear and probes her after rubbing oil on her or whatever. Probes her with his finger, rapes her for the first time like that. So. And it just goes on and on like that, and she's very insightful and very smart. This is a really intelligent woman, and she's done a lot of work. Like she's what, 10 years away from it all. Well, several years away from it all by the time she writes the book. So she does quote other people about what goes on with trauma, other writers that clearly she's been reading and studying and trying to work out, and she's in 12-step meetings and so forth. I'm going to read a little bit about. I want to talk about Robert Maxwell a minute. Because Robert Maxwell, of course, and there's another suicide. Robert Maxwell, who was this Mossad agent, this noted, he's buried in the Mount of Olives in Israel, and so he was all very connected to Israeli stuff, as well as being this publisher of newspapers in Britain. And ultimately, when he died, one way or another, I think that one of the assumed situations is that he was on his boat when he fell off the boat. One idea is that he had a heart attack and fell off the boat, and his bloated body was found later. The lady Ghislaine is the name of the boat. So yeah, so I when Robert was Robert was a sleaze. It was and all the Maxwells were sleazes. The brothers, he had a lot of children. Ghislaine was the youngest, the young baby daughter, and Maxwell was a horrible guy, and and when he died, he'd been in serious financial trouble. He'd ripped off the pension funds of the employees, of people who had been in his employ. So there you go once again, the pattern of they're nothing, they're my slaves, and that's kind of what. One of the things about Ghislaine, there's in the book she quotes an article where somebody, a friend of Ghislaine, had asked about the girls at one point, and Ghislaine said, "Well, they're nothing. They're just trash." So it's this 1%er attitude about the rest of us, and this is I don't think we've heard the real story here yet, and I don't know how much of the story we're going to hear. I guess we're not going to get to see the tapes of all this surveillance tapes, all this blackmail stuff. I have in my page here the Whitney Webb books, the two books that Whitney Webb about the United States of blackmail, and the story of Jeffrey Epstein and his blackmail network, and how it was all tied up with all these CIA agents and spies and corporate people and all this stuff. So yeah, I get the house, as we know, in New York and down in the island, apparently was all covered with surveillance cameras. So apparently it was all taped, and some of this stuff is somewhere, and that's what we were hoping would be revealed, that maybe Epstein would blow the whistle on his compatriots in this, his buddies, his Clintons, his Trumps, but we didn't get to that because it seems like something's being hidden from us. So I'm going to read a little passage in here about how she feels about what went on here and what she feels about humanity in general, and whether this is an aberration. I mean, clearly from her background, she's getting raped in South Africa, she's getting raped in England, she's getting raped in America. It's all over the place. So, it's not just one bad apple here with Jeffrey Epstein. There's an interesting passage here. I have come to believe that the potential for dehumanizing lives within all of us, as evidenced in the story of humanity. Most will never commit the deeds that Jeffrey and Ghislaine have, or even conceive of such horrors, yet our collective saga proves that we can be conditioned to hate in ways both measured and unthinkable. It's in all of us, and I think all of us have to search ourselves here to figure out how to get out of this kind of thing. If we care to get out of it, it seems like things are just going to get worse. I mean, here we've, we haven't even come, full maturity of all the people who have been distorted by online porn in the past few years and exposed very early, and the strangeness that went on with the pandemic and how that isolated people, and what that's going to cause as far as trauma and resurgence of weird crap. It's I think and the victims, the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein, are still relatively young. I mean, they're kind of 40-ish. They're not they're and she states in here that a lot of times these things, you don't really feel what has gone on until later in life. And it was a section where she talks about the statutes of limitations, how the statutes of limitations should be extended because, I guess it was set at 21, childhood rape situations, whatever, the statute of limitations would end when the person turned 21. Well, that's not going to work because, they're not ready. They're not, it's not come out yet in a lot of people. It's not really there and palpable and realizing what exactly all went on and what the impact of it all was. I know in my situation of this, my weird little trauma that, bothers me, and maybe, of course, it's not as bad. Of course, it's not as bad as what happened to these women. And to Sarah, and but our own individual traumas, and it had to do with power. It had to do with older boys that I admired in the neighborhood, and 5 years older than me when I was like 10 or whatever, and how there was a situation where some kind of sexual thing was going on with one of them, Woody Wilson, who lived up the hill from me, and so there was one situation, I talked about this before, but I don't keep talking about it, where Woody Wilson had, and a couple of his friends had me down on my knees, and they're circled around me, and they're wanting me to suck them off, and then we got caught, and then I'm being interviewed by my parents, about sexual stuff, like, my parents haven't talked about sexual stuff before, and I'm being asked, did I put some PP in my mouth, and, I denied it, I don't even know what happened, even today, but I know that situation is exciting to me. I've noticed, this is, in my 60s, all this started coming out, that I realized that a lot of my sexual behavior and a lot of the kinks, whatever kink I might have, which is kind of exhibitionistic, really, is informed by this situation, and the being caught in the situation, and the sucking of dicks. So, I don't know, these things can have a real detrimental effect, and as I realized, since this is gone, I haven't really had stable, long-term relationships, and I don't know if that's part of it, or if it's just because I'm just, otherwise, a rugged individualist of the, American sort and the story and all that stuff, raised up in a time where, individualism, for me, was particularly quite the thing, so, think we're going to see an outpouring of a lot more of stuff like maybe this memoir, and a lot more people talking about what went on. She talks about the 2016 election and how it all kind of freaked her out, in that both candidates were connected to Jeffrey Epstein. I'll read some more. My blood curdled at something else. Whenever Donald and Hillary's faces flashed on my screen, I didn't see an apprentice star and a policy wonk, a red, white, and blue candidate. I glimpsed a man who once hobnobbed with my oppressors, and a woman married to a former president who befriended my assailants. Donald and Bill had dined with the predator who had sodomized me. My weeping at the sight of Donald and Hillary flowed from a visceral place, a spiritual basement where I had stored the wailing. Yeah, so there's that. So yeah, it's a really good book, and she does go into detail about what went on, and her whole, all through her, even till now. I mean, she's still clearly struggling, and with this horrible childhood she went through, and all these things, and so it's. I've never read anything quite like this. I mean, it is very, very confessional as to what she had gone through personally and how it led to this. And as I said, we have a grooming society that is preparing girls to be raped, preparing them to act, and preparing boys to rape, preparing boys to seek out the face shot in their girlfriends, having watched that on the dynamic of the penis and its shooting capabilities is very cinematographic, and works well in porn, as it shoots, as guns shoot, as everything shoots. On a sort of a lighter note, or odd piece, I'm in New York, so and Jeffrey Epstein was, around the art world in New York. He worked at the Dalton School, which is big, fancy private school in the Upper East Side, I think. But remember the blue dress? There was a blue dress. She reminded me of it in reading the book. I kind of forgot about that part, but there was a painting of Clinton, Bill Clinton, in a blue dress that Jeffrey Epstein had, and was discovered among his things when his apartment and when his townhouse, $30 million, whatever it was, mansion was raided in Manhattan. Well, it turns out that I knew the model who painted, who was modeled for the painter of the painting, of the dress painting, and then she took Christoph Niel was the guy's name, and he's was a model, in the modeling scene that I knew, and he was a really good model. He could model and make faces, like, you could do that for all day long for the pose. Like I don't get into the face things. Like even a smile is hard to hold in a pose. But anyway, basically his body served as the model for this painting. And he found out about it all as everybody else did. Like, the artist didn't know that the painting was in Epstein's house, and she didn't know how he got it. And of course, Christoph didn't know anything about. Christoph has now passed away. He died a couple of years ago, young, of cancer. But and it was a nice man, and also a musician, and kind of an artist in his own right. So it's a really good book, and has a lot of photos of her life, her childhood, some photos of her with Jeffrey. She's from kind of like royalty, practically, in England, and a really kind of weird, crazy family story. Like, her grandfather still had this big mansion in Scotland, but didn't share. He didn't share his wealth with, and so her and her mother are struggling while Grandpa has all this money. So that's the way people are, and they won't release their money. So it's a good book, and it's a really sad story, and as I said, it's a story that's still unfolding, and we're going to hear more from Jeffrey Epstein's people, I think, in the coming years. And we're going to hear more about other stories of people who have been abused by our delightful society here, as things get worse. I mean, things are worse than they were, 20 years ago and 30 years ago, when all this was kind of cooking up and going on. It's humans are screwed up, as that passage said there. As I read that passage there about how evil is not just that guy; it's a whole bunch of people, and it can bounce from one society to another. If you're a victim of evil, you might end up being a perpetrator of evil on the next round. I mean, it's things like that do occur. In the book, Sarah Ransome mentions her legal team, who included David Boyce and this guy Pottinger, Stan Pottinger. Well, I mean, once you get a lawyer, that's not exactly the end of the story. And both of these guys, her representation, have a really kind of murky connections to a lot of other things, including CIA operative stuff, and particularly this guy Pottinger, who was married to a longtime partner of Gloria Steinem, who was worked for the CIA, and it's common knowledge, we know about this. So yeah, he's this sort of murky character who has been involved with this case and the Epstein stuff as well, and so that kind of thing kind of taints everything. Like, the people who are defending you end up being kind of connected to the people who are who abused you. So it's the sort of connections and waves of the intelligence system and all that are just mind-boggling. And of course, I don't know anything about it. I'm just this guy talking on YouTube. But I'll present a link to a podcast that talks about this a little bit. That talks about this Pottinger guy, and so you can check that out if you want to. So. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at there, and silence no more. So speak your truth if you got one, and maybe somebody will believe you, and maybe they won't. Hard to tell. I try to believe people. I believe people who tell me what their experience with me was, and I heard from a couple people that said it was just not very good, and so I'll never have a relationship again like that. I'll never try to have a, because I think I'm kind of got screwed up from the very beginning with this childhood stuff I talked about, and my difficulty with my mother not being, really friendly. She's talks about her father thing, that she keeps looking for a father figure and goes from this man to another man to another man to another man. And ultimately, at the end, she's kind of like, okay, I want to. She leaves. She stays friendly with her last boyfriend, live-in boyfriend, Peter. And but they decide that they're not going to live together. So I don't know what the situation is now, but she is came to deal with her looking for a savior, looking for a father. She seems to be somewhat religious, so she's putting that on God the Father, which is another dead end as far as I'm concerned. But maybe I guess it works for some people. So yeah, pity a girl who's looking for her father out here, because there's a lot of people who will sign up for the role, and actually a lot of them will want to be called daddy. I know a guy that liked to be called daddy. I'm like, okay, I don't get it, but like and subscribe.